Okay, let's move on to Donald Trump also making some interesting eyebrow-raising comments, which have set off a firestorm here in Washington and on the newspaper columnists of America. Donald Trump weighing in on an alleged conversation, I'm going to say alleged, with a European leader of NATO, asking to Trump, allegedly, whether Trump would defend him. And he said, no, I would not defend you if you don't pay your bills. In fact, I would tell Russia, do whatever the hell they want. Let's take a listen to what he said.
The presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay.
You got to pay. Krystal, this has set off some of the most deranged discourse that I've personally seen since 2016, whenever he said something similar. At one point, the front page of the Financial Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and there's one other, I think the Guardian, the Big Five, I guess, as you could say, all had the exact same headline, which was like Trump to abandon allies, encourage Russians to attack. Now, first of all, that's not what he said. He didn't say abandon allies. He said, if you don't pay your bills, the minimum 2% threshold, then I would encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they want. That's not the same thing as saying that you're abandoning the NATO treaty. Second, and this is obviously something I feel very strongly about Europeans who are not pulling their weight, I have the official NATO numbers right here in front of me. The majority of the NATO alliance, even after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, including the great powers from Germany and France, including Germany and France and Italy, some of the biggest economies in the world, do not spend the minimum 2% on the NATO guideline. Now, they can do what they want, but remember that it's supposed to be a mutually beneficial pact that is happening here. So anyway, with all of that, I'm curious for what you think.
Yeah, so I have a few things to say about this. I mean, first of all, as you said, like the conversation probably didn't happen.
Yeah, okay,
it's probably not real.
It also obviously didn't happen.
Okay, so that's number one. Number two, I mean, listen, it is a crazy thing to say, to be like, hey, Russia, go ahead and invade whoever the hell you want. Like, I don't support that. I think that's an outrageous thing to say. I think it's part of why, like, you know, having him as commander-in-chief is once again, is a terrifying prospect, as he is incredibly impulsive and all over the map. And he was not the peacenik that his supporters try to claim that he was. So there's that, like, I don't think the comments were good. Now, I'm not a big NATO person, you know, and I certainly don't support the expansion of NATO. So all the freak out about the NATO alliance and the sanctity of it, and oh my God, he is going to go after NATO, et cetera, et cetera. I find that part a little bit silly, not only because I'm not a NATO person, but because he also didn't really do that last time he was president.
Yes.
And this is one thing that, you know, I think you have to consider his words, but I think you also have to consider what his actual policy was as president. And this is where, you know, we're just kind of getting back to this like Russiagate impulse within the mainstream press, within the Democratic Party, et cetera, which took just his words and his seeming, you know, often voiced sympathy and affection for Putin, and did not consider the fact that his actions were actually in the totally opposite direction. He was very hawkish towards Russia, did not in fact give them what they want, did in fact like bolster Ukraine and ship weapons to them in ways that even Obama was not willing to do. So I just think that the dialogue becomes very unhinged when you only take those comments and project them into policy and don't also look at the actual policies that he pursued as president of the United States.
That's so obvious and true, right? To anybody who is a genuine observer of this. I honestly wish we'd seen more of that guy whenever he was president. Trump expanded NATO. Trump is the one who put freaking North Macedonia into the U.S. nuclear umbrella. Do people even know North Macedonia is a country? Did you know that you're signed up for nuclear war, that if they get attacked? Anyone want to riddle me that about why exactly that makes sense? Or Montenegro? Again, people may know from a Bond movie. That's their most extent. They're going to know anything about freaking Montenegro. Also, now we're all signed up to die for Finland and Sweden, which is great, obviously. Countries that have previously been at war with Russia. Awesome. Now, let's think, too, about the actual substance, where everyone's like, he's going to abandon NATO. Trump shipped weapons to Ukraine. Trump was one of the most incompetent commanders-in-chief of our lifetime in actually executing what he wanted. He wanted to withdraw from Syria. Who just died? Krystal? Troops doing what exactly? Right. Oh, the ones who were in Syria.
bomb Syria.
Trump said he was going to abandon or he's going to pull us out of Afghanistan. That didn't happen. Signed a peace deal. He tried to do it allegedly or whatever at the end. Never happened. Biden is the one who ended up actually pulling through with it. Trump was the one who told us that he was going to force NATO to pay their fair share. None of that happened. And in fact, most of their defense spending remained static until the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And then even the measly Baltic countries are the only ones who are paying up, and they barely mean anything in absolute terms of military power. So like I can go on and on forever in terms of like what he actually did. But that's part of why it's so infuriating, because I'm like, I wish he would be more like this. If he were the president, if he did this, I would support him even more. I'd be like, absolutely, congratulations, please make them actually pay their fair share. But that's not what happens. It's like NATO at this point is a religion. And then that's what I've really come to understand. Ukraine and NATO allegiance is a literal religion of the columnists and the foreign policy elite in this country. They think it's like 1976 or whatever, and the big bad Soviet Union is on the horizon and all this. It's complete nonsense. I mean, even here in Ukraine is not in NATO. Ukraine borders NATO. That's different. It's not the same thing. They treat it as an attack on NATO. It's like, well, then what does that mean? Every country that borders NATO is now also in NATO. There's no limiting principle to any of this. So it's one of those where the freak out does not match the action. And then even then, consider this. Majority of people at this point are against more funding to Ukraine. How can you try and run this like NATO scam again electorally after the majority of people see through your BS blob talking points? So that's it. Finally, then we have to get to Nikki Haley, who of course is seizing on this. You know, she's running on NATO, I guess. She's going after Trump for saying that he would quote unquote abandon NATO, even though that's not what he said. Here's what she had to say.
NATO has been a success story for the last 75 years. But what bothers me about this is don't take the side of a thug who kills his opponents. Don't take the side of someone who has gone in and invaded a country and 500,000 people have died or been wounded because of Putin. Don't take the side of someone who continues to lie. I dealt with Russia every day. The last thing we ever want to do is side with Russia. What we always need to remember is America needs to have friends. After September 10th, we needed a lot of friends. We can never get into the point where we don't need friends.
So, you know, it's like, look at the way that she talks about it. It's like a religion. It's like friendship. Friendship is supposed to be mutually beneficial, not one person taking something out of your pocket for 75 years straight. I don't know. I just don't get it. Like the way that they talk, you know, freak or whatever about this. And I also just genuinely think this is a popular position amongst the American people. If you frame it the way I did around, you know, it's like, listen, if you don't pay, then what exactly? You're not fulfilling your obligations that you all mutually agreed to over a decade ago. And then especially post-Ukraine, I don't know how they can think like being pro-NATO is a popular position outside of like the DC electorate.
Yeah, I mean, again, listen, I don't want to say like I thought his comments were great, because encouraging Russia to like invade wherever the hell they want is insane. Don't support it. That's just like imperialism. Also, with regards to NATO, you know, I don't think I do share that same position, because if you're calling for Europeans to increase funding of NATO, what you're really looking at is increasing even more funding to Ukraine.
Well,
it's not really
while we decrease our funding,
right? But it's not really calling for like, you know, cutting back NATO or, you know, curtailing it or even moving forward with the war in Ukraine. And that's the other thing is like, you know, he made some comments about the Ukraine war. He doesn't really talk about these things anymore. His position's very unclear. And it was very all over the map from the beginning. You know, sometimes he'd be more hawkish in what he said than Joe Biden. Then when he realized there was a political lane for him to be, you know, calling for a negotiated solution, then he was, oh, well, make a deal on day one. Who the hell knows what this guy is going to do when he's actually in office? That's the real truth, is the things that he says, the things that he does, the things that he wants to do versus the things he's actually capable of doing are two totally different things. But, you know, at this point, to have a total panic freak out over some comments related to NATO when he wasn't able to deliver on any of that or push forward any of that agenda last time around, I just think, you know, the freak out is not justified.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, actually, Michael Tracy went back and pulled all these predictions made by David Frum in July of 2016 of what would happen with NATO. Not a single one came true. He's like, NATO will be abandoned. Trump will pull us out of, not one. Like expansion, increase of funding, more NATO-friendly policy, consistently allowing the NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg to basically roll him, and Stoltenberg would smile at Trump and be like, "Yeah, absolutely. Just keep giving us a little bit more money." And Trump would be like, "Okay, sure. The NATO Secretary General told me he was going to do it." He's like, he was so easily to manipulate and to influence. And honestly, we don't talk enough about that. And Trump supporters and them too. They don't
really grapple
with any of that.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.